Hey, what's up? Welcome to today's video. Today we'll be looking at Nuxt 3, and it's just a chilled live stream looking at Nuxt 3 with Pinia state management, and also looking at some unit testing with Vitest. So yeah, I guess let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is just create a Nuxt 3 project with npx nuxi init, and I'm going to call this Todo Nuxt 3 and let that run. And I will also go to my Twitter and just share this video so that people can join from Twitter if they want to. So let's copy this link and share. Cool. So welcome. We've already generated this Nuxt 3 app. So I'm going to open up in code. And then once we're in code, we can look at, that's not what I wanted to do, cd to do Nuxt, and then open it up in code. And then once we're in code, we can look at what's required. So I'm going to go to, I'm actually going to install some dependencies that I think I'll be using. So I believe I'll add the, so let's see if I can zoom. So I'll add the Tailwind plugin or build module. So I'll do yarn add at nuxt.js / tailwind css. I believe this could be a development dependency because it's a build module. Let's try that, and let's try adding at Pinia Nuxt as well, and we can also add the test framework, which would be Vitest, and we can also add C8 for coverage, and I believe that would be it for now. Adding that over there, and perhaps also the dependencies we need to add Pinia itself as a normal dependency. All right, so this is the base structure of the normal Nuxt app. Nothing special. While these dependencies install, I'll just maybe create some files along. So I'll create a file or a store and add a todo.typescript, and what I'll also do is I'll generate a Tailwind config, because Tailwind, when you do class equals something, yeah, so Tailwind is an extension as well on, or has an extension on VS Code. Maybe I can zoom this in a little bit more. That looks a bit better. Tailwind has this extension for IntelliSense, but it also requires a Tailwind config. So all I'm going to do is npx Tailwind css init just to create this Tailwind config, but I'm not going to put anything in there. I'm just going to leave it as is. So that's going to stay as is. So now I should be able to do like empty, yeah. So now I get nice autocomplete things from Tailwind. Then I hope the dependency is installed correctly. We have dev, build, start. We have Pinia as a dependency. We have Nuxt.js, Tailwind CSS, and Pinia Nuxt. So we'll add these as build modules in the Nuxt config. So let's do build modules, and we'll add at Nuxt.js / Tailwind CSS. And we'll also do at Pinia / Nuxt. And before we do anything else, let's run it. I always just like doing a build before doing a dev, just to see if it will build, and as you can see, it doesn't. This is telling me that byte load fallback could not load Pinia test Pinia MJS. Is it maybe because my store is empty? Because I didn't really do anything. Let's try creating a store. So let's do import define store. I think that's what it's called, from Pinia. Something go wrong with the installation. Let's just do yarn to see if everything's up to date. Alright, so Pinia is installed. And then in define store, I'll just do a export const. Hey, Raju Reddy, what's up, man? Thanks for the super chat. Okay, so we'll do use to do store, because that's like the convention, equals a define store, which we have to name the to do store, and then we can give it properties like state, getters, and actions, just like Vuex. So I don't really like defining them inline like here. So usually I'll just do like a const state equals a function that will return an object of items, which will be empty. And getters, we can just do an object, and same with state. I mean actions can also just be an object. So let's see after that update if I can do a yarn build. Nice to see you too, man. Welcome. Okay, so the first thing that I see over here is there's no utility classes were detected in your source files. If this is unexpected, okay, that's just because we haven't used any things. So let's just do something like class equals max. So also you need to do a space before you get the suggestions. So if you just start typing, it won't, but once you do a space, then it'll help. And as a Tailwind beginner, like these suggestions really help me out. So I'm just gonna do max width full. So just to have something in there, just to not have these complaints. So it looked like the server built. Let's do a yarn dev. Yeah, so dev would run Nuxt dev, and we have a Tailwind viewer going, and it's spinning up on localhost 3000. Yeah, so it looks like it's building. No errors just yet. Let's see if we open up the browser, if we get anything. Okay, so that's what we got. We got the plain Nuxt, you know, boilerplate thing, the welcome. But that's not actually what I want to focus on first. I think what I want to do first is actually do the logic, or like the entity logic of to-dos. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna define what I think I want to do, and then write unit tests for them, or write tests with Vitest. So let's close down these, keep us from getting distracted. And we have items, getters, actions. But before I do that, what I actually want to do is define some TypeScript interfaces and types that will just help with knowing what is expected in the properties and etc. So the first thing I want to do is export an interface called to-do. That's like our main entity, and this will receive an ID of type string. It'll receive a label or title. Let's do title, which would be a string. It would have a state of done, which would be a boolean, and it will have, let's just be all SQLite can have a created at, which could be a date, and a updated at, which would also be a date. And then, so what we can do over here is in state, we can define that state. Let's define a state interface. Let's say export interface to do state would be, at this moment we only know that we want items, and items would be either an array of to-dos or an array of undefined, because that's what it currently is, right? So we have an items array with 0 items in them or nothing in it, so that's an undefined array. And just to you know, be consistent, we can do that. So we'll just add that as the return value, and that's happy because that matches the interface. And now what I'm going to do is define the getters of the items. So this is going to be an array of to-do items, and there might be a few getter things that we want to do, like get by ID. So we could just say by ID, but I'm going to do it like a verb type syntax. So with Pinia, in getters, you get the normal, it's a function, each property is a function, but you don't access it like a function. So we can do this here as well. And what the cool thing about this is we can define it to return another function. So we can call getters as a function and provide it some params. So what I want to pass in here is the ID. And I mean, all this logic we could just do in the component itself, but this video is about like doing unit testing and using sort of Pinia and all that kind of thing. So yeah, let's try and get there. So the ID would be a string, and this returns what this will return is, we don't really need to, we can do that. So what this will return is return state dot items. So now we get the nice autocomplete because we have told it that we are getting the state stuff. And I'm pretty sure like there's inferred typing as well, but I just like, you know, like seeing my own types and stuff being defined. So it will be state.items.find item, where the item.id is triple equal to the ID that's been passed, right? So that's how we'll get so that's how we get the item by ID. And another thing we might want to do is get ordered to-dos, and this we won't call as a function because we won't give it a function as a return value. We'll give it the state, and we'll return just the let's see. So we'll do the state.items dot how will we do this? Okay, so the state.items, and we'll probably just sort them, and sort gets A, which is a to-do, and it gets B, which is a to-do, and we want to return a new date of the, well, I guess it's already a date, so we don't really need to worry about that. So a.created at dot get milliseconds, I think, minus b.created at dot milliseconds. So this is the base implementation, and the proper way to do unit testing is actually just, you know, throw an error and then fix the errors as you go into your unit tests or whatever. And we're getting some TypeScript, so object is possibly undefined over here. Can I do a question mark? Nope. So okay, a dirty workaround hack thing, because sometimes as to do, right? Or what if I do item to do and remove this funny looking syntax? Will that work? Yeah, it seems like it's happy. So in this case, we're doing a.created at .get milliseconds minus b dot, because if this returns a negative number, it chooses the second value. If it's a positive number or 0, it chooses the second value. But the point of the tests are like not to overthink things while we're writing these things right now, because in the test we'll say, all right, so we want to do this. Let's try and test the code that we wrote. If it doesn't work, then we'll come back to this and fix it. So this is just like what I think might work or not work. Okay, and then for actions, we probably have an add command. And for add, this will accept a to do or partial to do, I guess. Let's just do partial to do. And I guess we can define this as a to do add interface as well, so that we strictly define this. So let's do that over here. We can do export interface to do add. And all this really would need is a title of string, because we aren't going to be sending the ID and the done and the created and updated at from the app itself, from the client. We'll be doing it from the in the actions. So add would do that, and then what we can do is we can say this dot to do, or this dot items, I believe, dot push the. Okay, so we need to create that to do. So let's do const to do equals the partial to do, which will basically just be the title, but it also needs an ID. And we can probably get some typing on there if we do this. Yeah, so it's telling me that that's not correct. So the ID would be just a random string, I guess. Should we like use, we could use the index, but if we did delete items, then, or we could use the length of the array, and every new item, it would be a non-existing index. But the thing is, if we delete items, then that might break. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to clear this out and do yarn add uuid and yarn add -d uuid. Sorry, at types /uuid. And then I believe if we add something like this, we have to go to the Nuxt config and do nitro externals, yeah. And I believe we have to do, so what does this accept? Inline, yeah. So we have to do inline and then an array of uuid. It's just so that we transpile the uuid thing so that it works. Okay, so now we have uuid. So I'm going to do at the top of this file import uuid as v4 as uuid from uuid. And then at the ID, we can just call uid. So that'll generate a unique ID. And we know that partial to do has a title in it, so we don't need to do that. And when we add a new to do, the state will always be false, the done state. And oh, and hey, Nabil, sorry, I didn't see you over there. Welcome. And created at would just be a new date, and updated at would just be a new date, right? And then in this .items.push, we want to do the to do. So we're just appending the new to do to all the items over there. And you'd already see like we're sort of writing code going forward, or like we're writing code imagining how it's supposed to work. But this means that if we don't have unit tests or like a testing library, we have to physically build the UI and get lost in some different logic of like UI things. And then only then when we start like using this code, then we'll notice if things break or if something wasn't written right, then we have to come all the way back to our to do implementation to see what's wrong. But if we unit test it or whatever, just test it from the beginning, then we know as soon as we implement it on the front end, then it should work. So we have to do add in the actions. We can do a remove, and remove would probably just accept an ID. And over here we can just do this.todos equals this.todos dot filter the to-do, where the to-dos ID is not equal to the ID that's been passed. And this is a little bit inefficient because I mean we can find the index of this ID, and if it's like early in the array, then we don't have to go throughout the whole array to remove it. But whatever, this is JavaScript or TypeScript. We can do whatever we want to. Okay, so add, remove, update, and the update would receive an ID of string, and it would also receive the update, which would be a type of to-do update, which we have to create. So let's define that interface. So we can do to-do update would be we can update the title, but it's not necessary. So we can make that like, I should probably do this. And we can also change the done state, which is a boolean. So we can update the to-do's title and we can update its done. Yeah, let's leave it like that. So let's go back down here. So let's say we want to update the to-do. We can just do this.todos equals this.todos. I mean, not this.todos, this.items. Oops. That would have been a failing case in the unit test, but luckily we caught it before then. So this.items.map item. If the item .id is equal to id, then what we want to do, we want to return the item, but we want to replace it with the updated, and we want to update its updated at property with a new date, so that it's up to date, you know. And otherwise, so this is that case, but otherwise what we want to do is just return the item. So this looks a bit wonky, and again, going over the entire array just to replace one item. Don't know if that's the best way to go about it or not, but yeah. So we have add, we have remove, we have update, we have get by ID, we have get ordered to do's just to check out getters a little bit, and we have the items. So I guess that's about it for now for like creating the store on the to-dos. So I'm going to create a new file called todo.test.ts, and todo.test.ts would be obviously a test file where we'll use Vitest. But to use Vitest, we need to set up a vite config. So I'll do a vite.config.ts, and I think the way we do that is we'll do import define config. Is it called define config? I don't think that's what it's called. It's to can't remember what we're supposed to do in this file. Let me see if I can find an old reference. That's where I am now. So I believe I've done this on GitHub. So let me just have a look at my repos, so that I don't really need to dive into documentation right now and bore everyone with that. Ah, it was pretty close. So import the define config from Vitest, but then folder called config. And then we have to export default define config, which is an object, and that takes a property called test. And then in test, the only reason I want to do this is just to define where the test would be. So I'm going to go store and then star.test.ts, because I only want to test files in the store. Let's say that's the only use case in my you know, the manager has told me, like, we don't care about testing these components and everything, we just want to test our logic. So vite.config, that would be read by Vitest, and then package.json, we can add a test script. So let's do Vitest run -- coverage. And in order to use this coverage flag, we need to have C8 installed. So that's a necessity. And you don't need run. If you don't have coverage, you can just do Vitest, but then it will keep open the tests and have like a hot reload button on your keyboard. So I just prefer doing this, and I want to see what the coverage of the file is that I'm testing. Okay, so that should set up the testing, hopefully. Let's write a test to test if the tests work. So let's do import describe test and expect from Vitest. And what I'm going to do now is just have like a simple test. Describe runs test, it works, and all I'm going to do is just have like a mock test that says expect true.to be true. That's all I'm going to do. And then hopefully, if everything went well, I can just do yarn test. Let's see. All right, cool. Looks like it actually ran the test, it passed, it works. Nice. So I'm gonna minimize this again, and now we can actually look at testing our code. The one thing that I do want to add is there is some steps in Vitest, and I'm going to pull up the docs for that because in Pinia, to test it we have to sort of give it an instance, but I'm just going to pull up the docs for Pinia and address that over there because I completely do not remember what that looks like. So testing. So this is what I want: set active Pinia and create Pinia, and then set active Pinia with create Pinia inside. And that way we can import our use state and stuff. So what I need to do is do all this kind of stuff. Not that, not that. What's happening? Okay, from Pinia, and it's called set active Pinia and create Pinia. And I'm just going to make this like a global thing. So I'm going to say before all needs to be imported. I'm going to do this set active Pinia with create Pinia. And this basically just, you know, encapsulates your environment so that Pinia can actually run, and it has like an instance. All right, and then after all, what I want to do is just reset. Maybe we can actually reset this let's just write the test. Let's do describe and then use to-do store. And then in here we'll write our first test, and it'll be a basic test just to see that it actually can create a store. It creates a store. And how do we check that? Is we import the store, import use to-do store from /store/to-do, and then let's do const store equals use to-do store, and let's say expect store dot to be defined. You can probably make that more complicated and check like what it is an instance of or something like that, but right now I just want to see that I can actually create the store. Cool, so let's see. After all, I'll just remove that for now. Let's run this test. Here on test. And okay, so failed to resolve import from store. Does this file exist? I think this might be an issue with this reference. Let's see if I do like the double thing. And just make sure that I reference this correctly. Export const use to do store equals define store. Okay, so I think I just need to reference it directly, and it actually kind of makes sense. So I just need to do. Let's see if that works. Great. So our store is defined, and now we can see that we have some coverage showing. So this is telling us that we are testing the file todo.ts, which this is being imported from, and we're only covering 67% of statements, only 28% of functions, and only 67% of lines. So, and it also gives us helpful messages like you haven't covered 31 to 32, and if we go look at that, 31 to 32 would be get by ID. So we haven't accessed this. Well, we haven't accessed anything. So as we write our test, this coverage would keep going up, keep going up, keep going up until we get 100% coverage. And even then we still kind of need to write more tests, but that's not really the point of this video. This is just how to play around with Pinia and Vitest and stuff. So let's write some more tests. What I'm going to do, instead of doing this, I'm going to actually define a global store. And what would that be a type of? You know what, I'm going to make this like a return type of use to do store. Then I don't really need to know what type that needs to be, but I'm just going to define an uninitialized store, and then in here I'm going to do a before each. So I want to make a new store before each test, and I want to be sure that before each test runs that I have a complete new store. So before each would what that's going to do is the same thing as that this did. So I'm going to move that in there and remove the const. And then after each, we want to reset our store. And Pinia sort of provides a nice way to do this by just doing store.$reset. And what this does is it will reset the store to your initial state. And to us, that's just items with an empty array. And this way I know that every test I write, I have a fresh store. So when I add items and remove items and everything, then after finishing one test and going to the next, I don't have like old items just laying around and sort of messing with my test results. So let's see if this still runs. Now that's like an example of refactoring test. So we have to test if that actually works and not just assume. All right, so that still works, great. And now we can just start writing tests. So I have basically only one store. If I had more than one store, then each store in my mind would get a describe, depending on like, are we doing database stuff, API calls? But in this case, it's literally just storing things in memory. So it shouldn't be that difficult or that like complicated. Okay, so let's write another test. what do we want to do? We want to say that when the store is initialized, we expect the items to be an empty array. So we can say initializes with empty items. And so in that case, all I can do is just say expect store.items.to strict equal an empty array, right? Because that's what we expect. Let's run the test again. And let's see the difference in coverage. All right, so now you can see that we have another test, 2 passed, and we haven't really covered any more lines, even though we're just testing like the base store. We've actually tested that items are empty, the coverage is still the same, so we have to keep going. And this is where you can get creative with your tests, and you can go as deep as you want or as like shallow as you want. And we can say like test, we can create an item, creates a to-do. So now we can actually use our store. So let's do store.add a, so now we have like completion, or we have like some hints. That's why I created these interfaces, so that I know like what am I supposed to add in here. So this accepts a partial to do, and if I do this and I do control and spacebar, it tells me what is required, and I require a title, and I'm gonna say test my code. All right, so we've now added an item. So how do we test that it's been added? So we can do expect, and we know that the store is empty. So that's the great part about this reset, is that I know that every time I add an item, that is just the only item that's in there, and I haven't leaked some items from the previous test or something like that. So I can do some easy access work. So I can do store.items at 0. Let me just say to be defined as well. And I also expect store.items at 0 dot see, now I have the nice properties dot title dot to be test my code exclamation mark. So now let's run that test. I shouldn't have cleared it because I wanted to show you the coverage, but I think it was something like 28% on the functions, or 25% or something like that. So now you can see that 3 tests pass, and the functions are covered 42%. So we still have some work to do. And the one that we saw in 31 to 32 was that we want to get them by ID. So let's do test gets by ID. And what we want to have to do is, first we need to add an item, because there's no items, because the store has been refreshed or has been resetted. So now we have to add an item again. Store.add a item of title test. And now we need to see if we can get this item by ID. So we know now that this is only the first item in the store, so that we can say const item equals store.items at 0. And we've already tested that this is defined in the previous test, so we don't have to do that again. And then what we can do now is say expect, or let's first say const to do is the store dot get by ID, and this is a function. So now we can pass the item dot ID. So we've gotten the item by referencing it directly. We know we've just added that, and now we're testing this functionality by giving it that ID and expecting it to return the same item. So now we can say expect to do dot ID. Well, we can actually be real strict about this. We can say expect to do dot to strict equal And now we have to give it the whole object. So we can say ID would be the item.id. And I guess we don't have to destructure it that like this. We can just say item, right? Because we've pulled this item manually, so we want to have these two be the same. And we don't really want to reference the index of the item every time from our code. So that's why we wrote this nifty get by ID, so that when we loop through to-dos, we can just call this get by ID if we want to do like something with a single to-do. So let's test that again. Sweet, so that's been going well. Now we have 84% of lines covered, it's 57% of functions, and we're pushing a little closer every time to that full coverage, you know? And we know this works. We're happy with the code. We can move along. What else haven't we tested? So now we can look at our to-do. So we've done get by ID. Now we want to test get ordered to-dos. This is going to be a tricky one because we want to order some to-dos and make sure that they're in the right order. So how will we do that? So let's do get ordered to-dos. And what I have to do now is I have to add a bunch of to-dos, but I need control over their created at property. But in our methods that we defined, we don't have control over that. So what we're going to do here now is a little bit sneaky, or not sneaky, but it's basically just manipulating the state directly and changing the date created properties so that we can give it a jumbled up amount of date created properties, and then when we call get ordered items, we expect them to return the ordered items. So I'm not going to do store.add items. What I'm going to do is just say const items is equals to array, and we're specifically only testing the date created. So in theory, we need to add full to-dos here, but that's not what we're testing, so we don't really need to do that. We can just do date created and give it a new date, and let's just make sure these aren't, so we can do 2021 2 and the 14th, and let's copy this 3 times, or we probably can just do 2 times. And the second one, let's put it as supposed to be less than the first one, so 2019 214, and this one can be somewhere in between. So let's make it bigger than 2021 but actually smaller than 2019. So we can just change the month over here to 6 perhaps, but that'll be quite difficult to test. So let's just do a bigger gap over here. Let's just do 2020, whatever. Let's do that. So this order is incorrect because this should be first. No, actually this should be first, this should be second, and this should be third. So all of them are in the wrong place. And what I'm going to do here now is a bit not too great, but I'm just going to say store.items is equal to, and probably TypeScript will complain, is equal to items, and it does. It's telling me that it's not assignable to these types, and I'm missing some properties, and what the hell are you doing? And the way I treat that is just tell it to go shush for now. And then now we can actually start doing the testing. So we want to say const to do, or ordered to dos is equal to the store.get ordered to dos. And this isn't a function. If I try and call this, you'll see it doesn't, it's like it's not callable. What are you doing? Because in the to-do, we aren't returning a function like we are over here. We are returning the items in a sorted order. And so get ordered to-dos, and then what I want to do is say expect ordered to-dos at 0 dot created at dot to full year, or I mean dot get full year. dot to be. So this should be the first one, which is 2019. And we can just repeat this twice. The first index and the second index. So I expect this to be 2020 and I expect this to be 2021, right? So this should be the cases. And if you think about it, we actually also want to check that the state is not mutated. So we still have the exact same state. So what we can do is get order to do's without mutating state, which is kind of funny because we are mutating state directly over here. But I mean, don't order this or don't manipulate the state with this function. So the easy way we can test that is just to say that expect the store.items at 0 dot created at dot get full year to be the same as it was. So it should still be 2021. We don't want our store.items to change when we call order to do's. And I already know that I've made some mistakes over here. So when I implemented this, and this is probably going to fail. There we go. So, whoa, quite a few errors. Okay, so cannot read properties of undefined reading get milliseconds. Okay, so created at is undefined. Oh, right. That makes more sense. Try that again. Alright, so expected 2021 to be 2019. And that's at the order to do's. We aren't getting the order. And I think I know why this is. Because in the function, I'm calling get milliseconds. And I don't think that's returning what I expect it to return. So let's maybe open a browser console to test this out. And we can do new date.get milliseconds. Yeah, so that's just returning like the milliseconds on the date property. So what I actually want to do here is get time, because that gives me the full epoch milliseconds. So that should fix the ordering issue, I believe. Let's test that again. All right, so the ordering seems fine because it went through all the to-dos and everything passed over there. But the error is now thrown at this one, where it expected 2021 to be 2019. And so expected 2021 to be 2019, which now we've mutated state, because in this function, we are using the dot sort method on an array. And when you call dot sort on an array, what it does is it will actually sort the array in place and mutate the original array. So a quick way around that is just to add this to there, and now we are creating a new array and then sorting it. So let's try this again. Let's clear this out. And there we go, our tests have passed. So we only have two more blocks of code to cover, and then we can probably just implement this. So what are the other cases? So now we have a add, remove, and update. So we already tested add. We we don't need to test that, but we need to test remove and update. So we've tested add over here and over here and over here, and we started with creates a to do with store.add, gets by ID. So now let's do test removes a to do. So we can say that we can add a to do, so we can do store.add title of test, and then we can just reference that and say that the item const to do is equal to the store.items at 0, because we know that this is the first item. And then we can say store.remove the to-do.id, and now we expect the store to be empty again. So expect store.items .to strict equal an empty array. It should have removed that item. Let's see if it does. Yeah, test. And it does, it removes it successfully. So we basically just have one more thing to do, and that is updating a to do. And now you can see we had 85% function coverage and 93% line coverage. And the closer we get to that all green output, the happier we become as TDD developers. And just because also if you have full coverage doesn't mean that you have tested as thoroughly as you possibly can, because full coverage doesn't mean like you've tested edge cases like formatting or types of the params and stuff like that. So the final test that we're going to write is it updates a to do. And this will be store.add. We first need to create a to do to update, which will be test. And then we need to reference that. The to do is the store.items at 0. And then we can do store.update. It accepts an ID, so we need to give it this to do.id, and it accepts an update. And update is of type to do update, which we defined. And if we do that, we can see that we can either update done or title. And this is probably also a good place to show you why coverage isn't the best. So let's just update the done property to true. And we can do expect store. I guess we can just say expect to do, because it's being referenced by value over here. So I guess we can just say expect to do dot done dot to be true. And let's test again. Nope. So expected false to be true. So I guess I can't reference it like that. I need to do well, I mean, it could have actually just failed the test. Let's see if we do get the to do again, which doesn't make sense really. Const updated equals store.items at 0. Expect updated dot done dot to be true. I have a sneaky feeling this is going to fail again, so clear test. And that means we have an error in our update code. Oh, never mind, it worked. So now you can see that we have 100% coverage, but there's one uncovered line, 55. What is that? So this is like a very complicated, weird thing, but what it's really telling us is I don't even think we'll be able to reach this code. Yeah. So let's refactor this. Let's listen to our tests and let's refactor this. Let's do const index equals this dot items dot find index, and we'll do the item dot id is equal to the id, and then we can also do the item to replace. So what I'll do is I'll just say I'll just splice the this dot items dot splice at the index 1 and replace it. No. Should I replace it? Let's not do that. So we'll find the index, and then, oh yeah, then we can just do this dot items at that index is equal to this dot items at that index, but we also want to replace it with the update, and we also want to give it the updated at of a new date. Right? So this finds the index where it should be updated. It looks at the items at that index and then changes it to everything it was except the update that came in and the updated at property. So I think this might also perform a little faster than the map function, because the map has to complete the entire array. So like if you had 1,000,000 items in an array and this item just turns out to be the second item, with find index it'll stop as soon as it reaches it, and you don't have to go over the 1,000,000 items. So it's probably a little bit more efficient as well, but I don't know. So let's try and remove this updated thing and then just do to do, and let's see if that works. Oh wait, no, we weren't supposed to do that. This was actually correct. What have I done? This, yeah. So first we add the to do, and then we reference that to do that we just added, and then we update that to do, then we get it back again, and then we expect it to be done. So let's test. Alright, so now we have 100% code coverage, but does that mean that we tested thoroughly? I don't believe so. Just hold on a moment, need to close the door. Alright, so does that mean we tested the code thoroughly? I don't think so, because at this point of time we've never tested that we can actually update the to-do's title. We've only updated the to-do's done method. And so we need to test that it also updates a to-do title. And then we can do this exact same thing that we did earlier. And we can just say title test, and what we want to do now is title tested, and then in this check we can just say that title should be equal to tested, and there you go. So that should still cover 100% of the lines, but because we had two different cases of update, we needed to address both. So let's do yarn test. So 100% coverage is not always the main goal. Alright, so now we know that our code runs and all 8 of our tests pass, and we can rely on our unit tested code. And we know we can use it in our app without stressing about whether we've done the implementation correctly. So yeah, I don't know if you guys want to see me continue with this and go implement it in the UI now. If I should schedule another stream to implement it in the next one, yeah, let me know. I might just go ahead and start setting it up so long or so, but if you guys want to see it, I'll continue, but otherwise I'm gonna go eat. And by the way, I hope that this was sort of useful in terms of like how to add Pinia to Nuxt 3. And let's just run the app to make sure it's still alive after everything. Oh, we already have an instance running, so we can just open localhost 3000. And okay, so Nuxt is still running, which means we haven't broken anything. So yeah, I don't know, do you guys want to keep on going? And Raju, I appreciate that super chat. That was quite cool of you, man. All right, maybe let's do like the base setup and look at like a little bit of what's it called, Tailwind CSS, and if there's some feedback, then I'll continue going. But other than that, I'll just probably cut it a bit short tonight. So let's look at setting up Tailwind. I think it's already set up. I'm probably going to split the screen now so that we can see both things at the same time and keep it like mobile, probably mobile first. Okay, so we have the Nuxt welcome. We have installed Tailwind. It's ready and able. And yeah, I guess we can just start going. So my idea is like the same as this, have a little title, what are we doing today, have an input, and then have a list of to-dos. The input accepts a title text, and the input accepts the title text, and then it creates the to-dos. But for now, I think let's just get the title there, maybe get the input there, and then I'll end up the stream. Okay, so let's do this, delete that, and now we have a white screen. And this is the cool thing about Nuxt 3 or Vite, is the hot module reload, or the reloading is like super instant, which is pretty cool. So I'm gonna do a class of width full and min height screen, and this will just create a div that's like over the full screen, but I want to give it a BG of gray, like 200, so it's a bit darker. That might be too dark, maybe give it like 100. And then in this div I want to create a title, so I'm going to create a section and then just an H1 with a text 7XL, or let's do 5XL, and just say what are we doing today. And as you see, we don't see anything on the screen. Sometimes Vite or Nuxt's server doesn't hot reload, and not just that, sometimes you need to like refresh the page, but it happens minimally. And of course it just happened now after I said about how fast it is and stuff. So sometimes you'll have to go in and actually stop the server and do on dev again. But the thing is, Nuxt 3 is still under heavy development, so don't blame them. Okay, so I'm going to create a class of text center over here. And 5XL might be a little bit big, so let's do 4XL. And I'm going to give it a margin top of like 5. No, probably padding top because it creates that white line. Padding top of 5, and we can remove this margin. I kind of liked it over there, so let's do padding top 7. Okay, so the text is a little bit dark in my opinion, so we can do text gray 700. Yeah, maybe 800. And then that's the title. So we can also do, let me just bend that over and make this bigger. We can also do another section which would be the form, and this would have a I guess this would have a max width because I don't want to have it like the full width, so it'll be a width of, let's do 9 out of 12, but also a max width of, now we can look at this, I'm going to go 512. So that's for the form section. And then I'm going to create a form, remove the action, and just say add submit dot prevent. And in this, add an input, type text, and add a button, say add to do. And then this section would be MX authoed. And we can also say that this should be flex and item center and justify center. And I'll do a margin top of 7. I'm going to give it a background so it stands out a little bit, BG white. And I'm also going to give it a shadow, so I'm going to say shadow. Nice. For the input, let's do some padding. So PY2, PX4 probably. Let's give it a placeholder so we can see something. Add a to do. Or yeah, add a to do. I want to give it a little bit of an outline, so probably like border and border blue 200, so I can see what's going on. Okay, so this needs a padding, so let's do P5. Nice. And the form is inline, so the button I'm going to do a class of the same, border blue 200, and I'm going to give it some padding, PY2, and I'm going to give it some padding X just so they look the same. Then I'm going to give this one a margin left of 3, and I'm going to say that that outline should be, so let's do focus outline. I really don't want it to go away, so I'll just do blue a little bit darker. It's too dark. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so hovering the button, I want to see that I'm doing that, so I'm going to do hover on the button. I'm going to say BG blue 200, so it goes the same color as the, yeah, that's cool. So let's give it a transition, so transition all, and I'll also do a duration of 200 just to animate it a little bit. That doesn't seem like it did what I wanted it to. Should I add this before the hover? Yeah, there we go. So it's nice and slow now. And I don't want the corners to be so sharp, so I'm just going to say rounded. And this one can be rounded too. And even the card can have a bit of a rounding. Cool. So what are we doing today? We're doing stuff and we enter, and then we expect a new card to go down here and to-dos to be added. But I think that's enough for today's stream. It's been, how long have I been streaming? I'm not even sure. It's been a while. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. And Raju, thanks so much for the super chat. I hope I see you guys again next time, and then we'll continue on this and finish off the project, deploy it on Vercel. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day, and we'll see you soon.